So what I have is just a deck that's a very high level overview of what IxDA's, how we're made up. Wayne did a really good job of describing the region. So I'm going to give you a 30,000 foot view of the rest of the global community, and then dive into some of the initiatives that we coordinate from a global level. And then people can, if you've got questions along the way, by all means, put your hand up or put something in the chat, and we can dive into something in more detail. So everything we do starts from IxDA's what you would commonly call a mission statement. We actually call it a manifesto. It was developed by the community when the organization came together between 2003 and 2005. And we've done a reality check against it every few years since then, but by and large, the manifesto has not changed. So IxDA is a community that comes together around the discipline of interaction design, obviously, but with the intent of improving the human condition through advancing interaction design. And perhaps, it seems organic and natural to us, but it can be a little bit confusing to others. We do this based on self-organization and individual initiative. It's an open source platform. So everybody can contribute, and you literally get out of it what you put into it, I would say. We have 6 regional coordinators. Today we're a community of just over 100,000 people. In terms of the individuals like Wayne, there are 6 regional coordinators globally who are all volunteers. 304 local leaders. You'll find IxDA groups in 50 countries. And we have a global board of directors that's elected from the community. So these are the folks that currently serve on the board. Eric is based in Grand Rapids in Michigan. Alec, who's our vice president, splits his time between Brussels and Paris in Europe. Boone is based in London in the UK. Birgit is in Amsterdam. Kevin is also in Grand Rapids. So we have a little bit of a Grand Rapids design mafia going on, because coincidentally, the president of the IA Institute is also there as well. We're not quite sure what's in the water in Michigan, but they're all coming together. Marcel is a director, and she's based in Atlanta, and Nicholas is in Norway. So it's developing if you went back 5 years ago, this group would have been almost exclusively American, and slowly but surely, and with intent, we're getting to be a more diverse group of people. So one of the major initiatives that we organize each year and have done since 2008, is to organize Interaction Week, which is the annual conference that brings the community together. This year we were in New York, and we're just over 1,000 people, representatives from 40 different countries together. We call it Interaction Week because it actually is a 3-day conference, but a full day of pre-conference workshops. And I'll talk a little bit about the other initiatives that happen around it as well. But like I said, it's an open source community. So in terms of curating the content for the conference, we pick co-chairs for the event who then build their own team to do the content planning. And other than inviting the keynote speakers that happen at the beginning and end of each day, everything else is curated from a call to the community. And typically, and we're just going through the process now for the next conference, we'll have 500 plus submissions for about 50 to 60 speaking slots, which is a wealth of riches in terms of opportunity. You could probably curate 3 or 4 conferences from it. but not a small task in terms of finding what it is that we want to put on stage each year when we do this. That's just a couple of images from the conference. And the conference moves each year between North America and Europe. So this year we were in New York. In February of 2018, we will be in Lyon, France. And I'm just about to go on the road to visit locations to make the final selection next month for where we will be in 2019, but we'll be back in North America. And in tandem with the Interaction Week, we also have Interaction, what is currently called Interaction South America, that happens in November each year. Next year, it will change its name to Interaction Latin America to be a little bit more inclusive of the region. And that conference is similar in scale, but it's organized exclusively by the Latin American community. And it runs in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. So it can be a little bit of a melting pot in terms of languages as well. The next thing I wanted to touch on is the Student Design Challenge, which has grown up within the conference. It used to be a workshop that happened at the event on a sort of ad hoc basis, and now it's its own initiative. We partner with industry each year. Sometimes it's an agency, sometimes it's a corporation. It depends on who comes to the table. We've worked with foundations as well to set a brief that students submit their ideas against. And then what we do from those submissions is select usually between 6 and 8 students to come to the conference. So their travel and accommodation is paid for. And then what they do is they work for the 3 days of the conference against the brief to then deliver ideas on the closing day. And it's open to both graduate and undergraduate students. And our goal really is to bring together this diverse group of next generation designers to see what ideas they can bring to the table against a specific brief each year. And that's on my screen, if you can see it. That's just a slide from when the students were meeting in Helsinki last year. And then what we do is the 72-hour charrette that they work through at the conference, we also have mentors for them that are drawn from the community as well. So it's their chance to work one-on-one and get the thinking from people as diverse as, John Kolko, Dan Harvey, who used to be with Sapient, has been part of that mix. We worked with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation a few years ago around redesigning child healthcare records. So each year it has its own focus. So the next initiative I wanted to talk a little bit about is the Interaction Awards. Wayne touched on that because
Brenda, sorry.
Sure.
Brenda, sorry about that. I think one of our participants is not aware that they unmuted. Is it possible for us to mute from your end?
Yep, just a sec. Let me see if I can. I've lost my mouse. There we go.
Yeah, I think I heard some Quark Express master pages.
Dude, everybody that's laughing is friggin' old, bro.
Right, exactly. We've just dated ourselves. Oh.
I think. In fact, I think it might have been Sky's microphone. So, sorry, Brenda. Slight segue. Sky's based in Durban, and I'd like to hook him up with you, Wayne, for possible chapter.
Fantastic.
Sorry, guys. I just discovered the unmute button. I mean, the mute button now, so I'm gonna go ahead and press it.
No worries. We've all done that.
Well, thanks for those Quark tips.
It was in design, by the way. FYI.
Who still does master pages, right?
The old masters, I would say.
Yeah.
That's where the masters come from. Yes.
Yes. So please connect with me to set up a IxDA local group in Durban. Mo, will you distribute emails, etc., of all the participants?
100%, we can do that. Yeah,
That would be fantastic.
cool.
Brenda, sorry, back to you.
No
Sorry,
worries.
Brenda.
No worries. And it appears, hopefully you can't hear that background noise. It appears I'm living in a construction zone again, which just started outside my window. But back to IxDA things rather than Montreal construction. So yes, I was just starting to talk about the Interaction Awards, and late submissions are still open for the Interaction Awards till Friday this week. So if you're working and have projects, especially if you're coming from Africa and the region, your first submission is actually free. And I would love to see more work from the region in the mix of what we look at each year. The awards were started in 2010, and they're intended less to be, often within the community, people talk about it as, oh, that's our Oscars for, interaction design. But the intent behind the awards, much as the party and the presentation on the closing night of the conference is fantastic, is really to showcase case studies of interaction design and to build that living library of what it is interaction designers are doing around the world. And what's fascinated me is to see how those case studies get used. A lot of people who are teaching in interaction design will use the examples from each year's awards as part of their curriculum to look at where's the practice going, what are different ways at solving a brief, and how interaction design really does impact the nature of what we do and live each day. And if you're interested, you can go to the awards website. So it's just awards.ixda.org. And as I said, you can go back through each year of the finalists and the winners. And there's videos of each case study to see the scope and the breadth of the work. And Wayne touched on it, saying this year has been the year of conversational interfaces and chatbots, which is certainly true, and I think that's true in a number of places. It's always interesting when you look back on the awards and the conference content, you can pinpoint the theme, but you can never do it at the front end. You don't know what's coming, but when you look back, you can say, oh, yes, this year is the year of chatbots. Last year was the year of artificial intelligence. The year before was the year of mobile. So thematically, things become obvious, but it's never so obvious going into it. So hand in hand with the conference, just like the Student Design Challenge emerged from a workshop, the Design Education Summit also emerged less from a workshop and more from the kinds of ad hoc conversations that we all have when we go to events, and you find yourself over coffee or at lunch saying, oh, hey, I wish we could get together and talk about X or Y. And what became obvious at Interaction, the conference, was that there was a community of educators looking to have a discussion around what does it mean to educate somebody in interaction design. And so the Education Summit started as a workshop 5 years ago now, became a full day of programming, I want to say 3 years ago. And looking ahead to 2018, when we'll be in France, it's going to be a day and a half. About 150 people come together, and it's a mix of talks and workshops. So very interactive, very hands-on, design education across the whole spectrum. So you might be doing something with elementary school kids, and somebody next to you in your group might be a PhD research student. We also bring together, similar to the Student Design Challenge, we partner with industries, so you have that push-pull of how are we educating interaction designers and what are we hearing from industry in terms of the needs and the skills and the aptitudes that they're looking to hire. And this year, for the first time, we did a brief research project that was supported by Intel to actually map that kind of input and do a little bit of a gap analysis, I would say, of, what do people feel like they're, what do educators feel like they're graduating students in terms of capabilities, and then what does industry look for, and what do they see the needs are from the educators. So that can be a really rich discussion and very hands-on as well too, in terms of shaping ideas. So a little bit about how we're organized or unorganized. For many, many years, we talked about IxDA as the unorganization, and that's partly in terms of the ethos of how it was founded. We're not your typical professional association in the sense of you join your local group, which then belongs to perhaps a state group or a national group, and then they have, representation at the international level. You join the community as an individual. And I can see I didn't update this slide because now we have more than 300 local leaders. So I did the first slide and not the next one. But those dots that you actually see on the map are places where you will find local groups. I always use myself as a good example, even though I live in Montreal and have been here for years. I never go to local IxDA meetings, hardly ever. But what I will do is when I travel, I will go to an IxDA meeting wherever I am, because it's a way to meet folks in the community. And that's something that I see consistent through the community. People use the local groups when they're traveling as a way of finding other people, which is fascinating to see. And then local groups really emerge where there's a community in place that's interested in gathering. And people often the first question when they're putting their hand up to organize a local group is, well, what do I have to do? And the short answer is, do what your community needs or wants to do. So if you look across the spectrum of IxDA, you'll find everything from, a full day conference in places like New York, to UX book club, book readings, to speakers on tour that will do talks, workshops, hackathons. It can be 6 guys getting together for beer once a month. One of our local groups does pancakes once a month. Anything that just brings people together around the table. So there's not a format to follow in that sense. It's what feels right and what the team that is convening the community wants to do. It can be exactly what we're doing today. It can be, webinars and online as well. It doesn't need to be face-to-face. So just a little bit of rundown by the regions. So North America is where IxDA started. We currently have 58 groups on any given day. 47 of those are active. Virginia Cagwin, who's based in Atlanta, is the regional coordinator. Virginia actually has a long history with the organization. She was a regional coordinator when she lived in the UK as well, but now she's back in the US. I know she and Wayne know each other, but she's very accessible, very warm, happy to help anybody who's looking for information. A few photos from some of the activities in North America. That top left one is the local leaders workshop that we have every year in advance of the conference. So those are the faces of folks from around the world who come together at the conference who lead local groups in the community. And like I said, the activities can be pretty diverse. Sometimes they're social, sometimes they're practical, sometimes they're educational. It's whatever you want to do. Wayne has talked a little bit about the region, and yes, I think if we look at the scale, certainly Africa and the Middle East is the largest piece of geography. So doing things like this, yes, virtual meetups is a great way to bring people together and talk about what's going on and what people are interested in. It is I don't know, Wayne, if you talked about this. When I joined the organization, Africa and the Middle East was part of the Europe regional coordinator portfolio, which just seemed like a huge piece of geography. And so one of the things we did was to create the role for a regional coordinator in Africa and the Middle East to start to steward and connect dots. A little less ambitious piece of geography, and as Wayne, Wayne's done a great job, because now we do have 13 active groups, Wayne?
Yes, yeah, 13, looking at 14.
Right.
On various levels of sort of activity as well, from very busy to quite quiet, which I think is typical across the regions as well.
Mm-hmm.
That not all groups are sort of active the whole time, and some have a tendency to also fall off the map. But there's definitely a tendency this time of year, at the end of the year, everyone starts kind of gearing up for, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the festive season.
Yeah.
We get a lot of applications.
No, that's definitely true. There's a cycle to things. And as I said, there's not a format for local groups that's required. So you can hold one annual meeting. You can hold a once a month meeting. We have some folks who do things, almost on a weekly basis, it seems. But it's whatever the individual community wants to do. And there you have Mo as well, and Michael in the middle of the bottom row, who leads the Cape Town group. Latin America is, I would say, one of the, after North America, is probably the most active region in terms of organizing things. Erico and Eduardo are our co-regional coordinators. Somewhat like Africa, you have a lot of different languages spoken, although it's a little bit more cohesive. So for instance, Erico is based in Brazil. Eduardo is in Chile. So we have Spanish and Portuguese in terms of stewardship for the community. And Eduardo is actually a past chair of the Interaction South America conference. Last year was in Santiago, and I got to attend. And somewhat like Interaction moving between Europe and North America, Interaction South America moves between Brazil and the rest of the region, I will say. So this year we'll be going back to Brazil. Next month, Interaction South America will be happening in Florianopolis, which is a beachside resort town and a chain of islands. So it's all about islands of design from a content perspective. And there is everybody last year in Santiago, which was an interesting 3 days to spend. The first day of the conference, we had a citywide strike. The second day, we had an earthquake. And the third day, I got stuck in an elevator. So it was a memorable trip. Here's some of the other folks in Latin America and their groups. And then we have Europe, which is probably one of the smallest pieces of geography, but very active in terms of local groups, a lot of strong roots in terms of education for interaction design as well there. And Gilles, who is our regional coordinator, is also co-chair of the conference this year. So he's not getting a lot of sleep these days, I think. But he's put together a great team, and I said at the beginning, we're working our way through just shy of 600 submissions now to curate the content for the conference itself. And here's some of their activities. Somebody's very excited about pizza. In the bottom right, that is the local group in Berlin. They're currently running a really interesting series around ethics and social impact, which and they're recording them and make them available online as well. And some of those have been in-person meetings. Some of them have been remote meetings. They've had people like Brenda Laurel and Mark Rettig talk about what does it mean to be an activist socially and politically these days. Certainly given the current government in the US, that's something that a lot of people are asking themselves. A number of the other groups, Berlin, some of the things they were doing with temporary tattoos. We have a whole group of sketch noters within Europe. So it's always fascinating to see those pop up on Twitter after IxDA meetups. And then the last region is Asia, Oceania, which somewhat like Africa is very diverse and spread out in terms of local groups. So you have everybody from fairly well-established groups in Australia and Hong Kong to new groups, in mainland China. You have India emerging very quickly, different languages, different approaches, different issues in terms of, what does it mean to do design in context of the local culture or the international market. A lot of expats working in regions, which drives a whole different kind of conversation as well. So what's the local context versus bringing methods, tools, processes from outside, and do those actually work in a new environment? And Jay, who's actually based in India, and who's also a consultant with a lot of startups, is our regional coordinator there. And there's a few photos from some of their groups. The local group in Taipei is very active. They run a large conference every year. Yeah, okay. And this is where you find us. This is somewhat like we're doing today. IxDA lives and breathes in a virtual space online mostly. We have a discussion list that's part of the main website. Certainly a lot of conversation goes on Twitter. We have a Facebook group. If you go to our Vimeo channel, you'll find almost 800 videos, which is the collection of talks from the conference and the case studies from the awards as well. So there's a really rich resource there if you're looking for examples of interaction design. And then our LinkedIn group is actually just over 100,000 people. I was recently contacted by the folks on the LinkedIn side who manage the groups and the format, and they're fascinated that we have a very large community that is largely self-moderated and don't have issues that have been, popular topics of, we don't have trolls in the IxDA LinkedIn group. Which seems very surprising to the LinkedIn folks. And I'm like, well, it's just who we are. I don't know whether that's based on the manifesto or whether it's, we're a community that built these platforms as well too, so have a different approach to them. But there you have it. That's IxDA at a very high level. And I'm happy to chat about anything and hear more about what you folks are interested in.
So Brenda, thank you for that. With everybody's permission, I think what I'd like to suggest is maybe have Wayne lead the conversation as the regional chair. I think that's going to make the most sense.
Yeah, I'm most sure. I'm not sure who the other participants are. I think just to add to Brenda's presentation regarding the Vimeo, the IxDA Vimeo channel, every year the conference speakers and a lot of the activities are video recorded, and very soon after the conference itself. The videos are uploaded onto the Vimeo channel. They're very, a lot of the local groups are using them at their meetups to screen. I think most of the talks, I think, range between about 30 and probably 40 minutes. So they can be quite lengthy. But once again, you know, if one watched it, you can edit the highlights out of it as well. But it's a very good resource for those people who cannot make it to the actual conferences each year. I think also just on the IxDA awards, I know this year there's a probability of I think 4 entries coming from the region. We've had entries in the past. We've also had some success with them. So it's one thing I'm always doing is encouraging the local leaders within their networks is to enter projects that they've been working on or that they've completed into the awards to have a sort of more of a diverse entry range coming from all the regions as well. If you go to the IxDA Awards websites, there are 6 categories that you can enter under, and the templates that you need to fill in are quite sort of self-explanatory. So one thing about IxDA is they do not make anything difficult for the local groups and the local leaders and all the members of IxDA. So it's a very much sort of an open source environment. We had Gideon from Maputo. He's entering something, and we were discussing, you know, his entry form, and I put him in contact with the actual organizers themselves to helping out as well. So it's it's really an amazing community of people. And if you need guidance or help with anything, you can literally reach out to anyone globally. And the response rate is always incredibly high, Mo.
First of all, is to, like you quite rightly say, Mo, from in terms of the design community in South Africa, there's those that are still stuck in the paradigm of sort of 20 years ago, 30 years ago, sort of a graphic designer with these plugins. While on the other side is within the financial industry. I mean, everything from Deloitte to Standard Bank to First National Bank. I mean, they have whole teams of interaction designers developing teams of them working within them, doing incredible stuff. So there's those communities, and then institutions as well. I mean, I can remember in 2007, South Africa hosted the ACM's Interactions Conference. And that was still when Gary was around, Gary Marsden. I don't know if you met him, Wayne. But he was all together with, I don't know whether you met Johan van der Schuyf. At that point, they were Interactions Conference at UC. It was actually at the Design Endowment that they held it in the end. And so there are these like little pockets everywhere, all around the country, and it's somehow, like you quite rightly say, to create that social network and physical social network as well, where people meet each other for a beer and just chat, and somebody says, well, let me show you what we're doing. I think that's quite very important. And then with young people being around and seeing what is actually happening in the real world, and perhaps some of the older academics waiting for their retirement package, where they think, hey, maybe we should like open up stuff towards these type of things as well.
Brenda, any closing comments from your end? Thank you very much for doing this. Thank you, Wayne, for your support, and Marcel for yours.
I just wanted to say, thank you to all of you for showing up for this conversation as well, too. It's great to see this kind of turnout. definitely up for, you know, coming back and doing more, whether it's Africa specific or global topics, whether it's, you know, as we were talking about the awards or other things that might be on people's minds. The one thing that I would say, and I'm just looking at the chat, you know, especially in this region where people are so spread out, is I just wanted to touch again on the accessibility of this community. So if there's somebody, whether you look at a conference talk online or an awards project, and you think, wow, it would be great to get them, you know, online, that's something we can definitely do, is connect people. And you know, it is the thing that makes me, you know, still excited about working with this community, is how accessible people are across a whole range. So whether it's a student who just gets their first chance to be on stage, or, you know, somebody like Alan Cooper, who was just inducted into the, you know, Computing Hall of Fame, and you want to hear what he has to say, I know Alan's always up for conversation as well.